Market Journal, television for agricultural business decisions, is a presentation of the University of Nebraska-Lincoln's Institute of Agriculture and Natural Resources. Promotional support is provided by the Nebraska Farmer Magazine.
Hello everyone, I'm Bryce Duskett, and thanks for joining us today on Market Journal. As usual, there is no shortage of things to talk about when it comes to the agriculture industry. Our team has been busy lining up another full show with the latest information that is important to you and your operation. As we kick things off today, the Nebraska Department of Agriculture is urging caution as the state has confirmed a case of highly pathogenic avian influenza. It was detected earlier this week in a wild bird in Lincoln. We were joined earlier this week by the state veterinarian Dr. Roger Dudley to break down this news. What can you tell us about this confirmation case?
Well, this case was found. This sick bird was found in Lincoln, and we tested it for high pathogenic avian influenza, and it was confirmed positive. The thing that this does is really point out that the virus is in our flyways, and we have to be protecting ourselves.
I was going to say, it's probably not much of a surprise that surrounding states have been confirming cases in backyard and even commercial flocks at this point, right?
Correct. Several of our neighbors, including Iowa and Missouri and South Dakota, have already been battling this virus that started on the East Coast back in January. So it is not a surprise that the virus would show up in birds, and we want to protect our birds, our backyard birds and our commercial birds in the state of Nebraska.
The last time this was detected in Nebraska was 2015. What were some of the lessons that we learned from 2015, and how are you able to apply them here in 2022?
One of the big lessons learned was we thought our commercial poultry had one of the best biosecurity of any of our livestock species, which they did at the time, but we also learned that that wasn't good enough biosecurity, and so we've been able to ramp up the biosecurity over the last 7 years, and we hope we have enough biosecurity in our commercial flocks to prevent the spread.
So at the time of this conversation, has been confirmed in a wild bird in Nebraska, but your message is out there to people that have backyard flocks, but also those commercial poultry owners. Does that message vary, or is it enhanced biosecurity for both those groups?
It really is basically the same, that we need enhanced biosecurity for both groups. Biosecurity looks a little different on commercial property or commercial facilities versus backyard, but the message is still the same. You want to do all you can to keep the virus out by reducing traffic on and off your farms, by keeping things clean, wearing clean clothes in and out of the houses, and those types of things. So there is a lot of similarities.
What are some of the warning signs somebody should be looking for?
One of the biggest things, it often starts with a death loss. Death loss is the birds die very suddenly from this virus, or they can. But oftentimes we can also have things like decreased egg production, decreased water consumption, respiratory symptoms associated with the birds. And so those are things that we really want people to be paying attention to.
Mm-hmm. And if somebody does detect something like that, is it a phone call to the Nebraska Department of Agriculture their first step?
If they work with the local veterinarian very closely, they certainly can reach out to their local veterinarian and have a conversation. But otherwise, we should certainly welcome phone calls into the Nebraska Department of Agriculture or to USDA. USDA has a sick bird hotline that you can call into as well. So we want to get the information as soon as possible.
Thank you to Dr. Dudley for his time this week. We will have more on this developing story on next week's program. Our grain analyst this week is Darin Fessler of Lakefront Futures and Options. The Russian invasion of Ukraine continues to be the news that creates volatility in the grain market. On Tuesday, President Joe Biden banned oil imports from Russia. In return, Russia announced it would be halting exports of certain commodities and raw materials. I began the discussion with Darin by asking him which piece of news lately has been most impactful. Our grain analyst this week is Darin Fessler of Lakefront Futures and Options. Darin, always great to have you here on Market Journal.
Yes, thank you.
Well, with this Russia-Ukraine situation, a lot of news that comes out every single day. What has been the most fascinating piece of news, though, that has caught your attention?
Just all the things the world is trying to throw at Russia. And trying to address, the world's needs for fertilizer, oil, and how big of Russia is player in all of that, and how does that relate to the ag markets? And I think that's something that the market in itself is trying to decipher, and that's why you're seeing such wild swings in these markets. It's why you're seeing volatility in wheat in close to 100%. And you're seeing wheat move $1, $1.50 in a day, $2 in a day. I mean, the market is really trying to gauge what the supply strains would be if we took Russia out of the picture, and that is a very difficult equation to assume right now on any bullish or bearish positions.
We are recording today's conversation on Tuesday afternoon. Right before we came on here, it was announced that Russia has decided to ban the export of products and raw materials outside of the Federation until December 31st. That has a big impact on the commodity sector, doesn't it?
Oh, absolutely. And I'm looking at this from a holistic approach. And to me, that would mean that we're going to be pinched for fertilizer supplies probably in the fall here in the United States. What about Brazil? Obviously, we know Brazil is a huge ag producer, along with Argentina, Paraguay, Uruguay. Is there going to be a backdoor through China? And that's the approach I'm trying to take. That I still think Brazil is going to get these fertilizer. I don't know about the U.S., but you look at how much billions of dollars China has put in Brazil. I still think the Brazilian producer is going to get the fertilizer, but it's going to be indirectly bought probably from the Chinese.
I've got three charts in front of me: corn, soybeans, and wheat. Which one fascinates you the most right now?
Well, it fascinates me, or it scares me the most. It's probably wheat.
Yeah.
Some tremendous opportunities there for Kansas wheat growers in general. If you can just do HTAs, if you can just do cash sales, forward sales type of thing. I think that if you look at longer term, though, the corn market very interests me quite a bit here. I still think we got to get through the planting intentions. We got to get through weather. Do we have enough fertilizer needs? Do we have enough acreage? At the end of the day, corn's still a huge producer. I mean, we're still a huge producer. Corn's using a lot of different things. I think corn at the end of the day is probably the most interesting to me. I think if there was a year where corn could get to that $8, $9 mark with hypersensitive news headlines, or beans up towards 18 or 19, 20 bucks, I think it could be this year. But I don't think producers should plan on that. They should, again, step back, manage the emotions first, and then manage the risk.
So let's talk a little bit more about that. You don't think we've reached the high in these three markets, do you?
If we run into weather, if we don't get the acres, I know there's a lot of ifs there, but because of the headlines and everything that's going on around the world right now, I think the highs could still be yet to come, I should say.
I'm trying to think of how to phrase this question. When it comes to the situation in Ukraine, has the market realized this as a long-term problem at this point, or is it still addressing it day-to-day, short-term?
Nearby, I think it's a short-term issue that could turn into a much larger issue. What we really need to do is we need to get all parties, all sides together here and listen to each other. And I don't feel like that is getting accomplished right now. And again, that's creating for more volatility in these markets, not just ags, but look at the energy sector. Russia, huge producer and exporter of energy in itself. So that in turn is going to affect these ags. So I think there's going to be a lot of volatility yet to come here in these markets.
You tweeted something out and you hinted at it here. I want to dive a little bit deeper in it. The more the West does, the worse it will get, you say on Twitter. The winner will be China and Brazil, especially when it comes to agriculture. What do you mean by that?
I think that we're still going to be able to get some products that, even that they're sanctioned or embargoed, whatever, how you want to say it, from Russia, I think it's all going to be indirectly somehow related to China. I think if you look at what China's done, they've been very, very quiet. They're not really saying much. And to me, I've always taken the approach from China, don't watch what China says. Watch what China does. They've been buying a lot of U.S. products. They've been buying more Black Sea wheat over the fall time frame. I think China is going to become a much bigger player in this, and that could relate to U.S. fertilizer needs. Maybe we're not going through directly to Russia or the Black Sea. Maybe we're buying our fertilizer directly from China. We're still, I think, going to get that fertilizer somehow. China still needs the products.
Final thing for you, what piece of risk management advice would you like to leave us with, if any?
Yeah, these are wild times. These are some great opportunities out here, but I think the first thing producers have to do is manage the emotions. Emotions can really, you're seeing record highs, you're seeing highs since 2008. manage the emotions, keep things at risk here, or watch your risk, keep things off the marginable side of things. So watch those marginable type positions.
Darin, appreciate you coming back on Market Journal.
Thank you so much.
Thanks to Darin for joining us this week and giving us his insights in the grain markets. We mentioned earlier in the program that highly pathogenic avian influenza, or HPAI, has been confirmed in a bird in Nebraska. While it was just confirmed here in the state, it has spread to commercial barns in other states. To learn more about the implications to the poultry industry, we sat down with UNO Livestock Market economist Elliott Dennis.
Yeah, it really has, and really what we were talking about last time is the different, seeing HPAth really be in different flyways, with it being confirmed in Lincoln here and also even in Missouri. Really what we're concerned about is in commercial operations. If it is in commercial operations, then we have to go through and basically exterminate the birds. That has an important issue for supply going to the market. And really what that ends up happening is we start to reduce our exports, and we really start to put more more poultry out of storage. And so good thing that we have some storage, cold storage availability, but we are going to see those prices increase as we start to reduce that supply.
What have you seen in terms of reduction of supply? Are you able to track some numbers from USDA on that?
Yeah, so USDA releases their slaughter numbers every 2 weeks, and so we're going to be tracking that. But normally what we'll see is in these types of situations, using historical HPAth outbreaks is normally about 7 to 10% reduction in that supply. So consumers are going to be likely seeing a little bit higher prices, which when we talk about the other meat products, it has important demand implications, because as those prices go up, people tend to substitute into pork and beef products.
That's the good news, but for those poultry producers out there, we talked last time you were on Market Journal back in 2015 when this was last widespread. We saw a consumer's reaction. What was it, 20 or 30% reduction at the time? Yeah,
it's pretty substantial, and it really has to do with the sort of media, that kind of the attention it gets, and really kind of that zoonotic component. So if there's a lot of concern that potentially it's a health hazard, then we see that reduction in consumer demand a lot more. And this is not different than other foreign animal diseases. We talked African swine fever, for example, and just consumers are just generally concerned and need to be provided with some consumer confidence and messaging out there.
Well, Elliott, changing up the conversation a little bit, we were seeing that a cattle on feed report come out. What did you take notice of in that report?
Yeah, so first off, we had all-time high cattle on feed, which feels like every time we have a report, it's like, wow, we have set record numbers. And so that was the first thing. And the February report is really unique because we get to see marketings and placements by cattle that have less than 1,000 head of capacity. And really where that is at is about 15% of placements and marketing come from these. So not an inconsequential amount. So just, as we talk about farmer feeders, particularly here in Iowa and in Nebraska, they do, constitute, a portion of the cattle on feed throughout the year. Another thing to note was the placement weights. So we often get aggregate placements, and then we get placement weights. Really, they're lighter placements. And really what that means is cattle are going to finish at lighter weights.
Mm-hmm. We'll talk about the implications of that here in a moment, but let's talk about the price of corn. The price of feed is going up for that cattle producer out there, isn't it?
Yeah, and we've seen corn prices go up quite a bit, and really what we can do is, what does this mean for the cow-calf producers who ultimately is going to sell to the feedlot? We know corn is the number one feed input that we generally proxy all of the other feed costs with. And what we see is that relative to a 650-pound steer, when prices go up, we tend to actually pay a little bit less for that feeder steer, and the opposite happens, that we tend to discount heavier animals. And that's largely because we don't want to have heavy animals that have really high feed intake, and so we just don't want them to be there as large.
Mm-hmm. Because of that, what are you seeing when it comes to quality of beef as we move forward here?
Yeah, so we're really in this kind of narrowing of the choice select spread is generally how we're valuing that quality grade. As we start to build in throughout the year, that will start to widen a lot more. And particularly, I think we can see that potentially widen a lot more. We know that animals that are placed lighter tend to finish lighter, and lighter animals tend to grade more select. And so when we have a larger cattle on feed that are lighter weights, that can really put a large pressure, especially since we're placing those lighter animals at a time when we're going to need a lot of choice product through the summer grilling. So it will ultimately incentivize producers to feed cattle a little bit longer, and really that there's going to be that trade-off between, should I feed them a little bit longer to capture that premium on the choice select spread relative to the price of corn.
Elliott, real quick, want to leave the last word with you. Final piece of advice when it comes to risk management you'd like to leave us with.
Yeah, I think anyone who's been watching the news over the last couple months realize that there's a lot of volatility, a lot of uncertainty, both in the domestic market and the international market. Livestock risk protection is one of those tools that can really be beneficial when we're talking about really people as we're going to the calving season. The unborn calves LRP is really giving producers right now an opportunity to price in some of the best prices we've been able to achieve really since we've been tracking it. So I think if you haven't explored that option and are looking to go from not managing risk to manage some sort of price risk management, livestock risk protection, especially with the increase in subsidies from the government, is really a great advantage.
Thanks again to both of this week's analysts for their time and expertise. Remember, if you have a question you'd like for me to ask one of our future analysts, feel free to send those questions our way, and I'll be sure to pass them along. Moving on, for centuries, Nebraska's prairies were known as a natural home for bison. Perhaps that is one of the reasons that today, Nebraska ranks second in the nation in total bison production. Marty and Karen Bredhauer with Straight Arrow Bison Ranch near Broken Bow have been raising bison and marketing their homegrown bison meat since the early 1990s. They take their mobile cabin, which is Straight Arrow's answer to a food truck, on the road to farmers market locations around the state to market the meat from their bison herd. You can learn about all the things that it comes to know with the operation at Straight Arrow in the March issue of the Nebraska Farmer. It is time once again for weather with Nebraska Extension Ag Climatologist and Market Journal Chief Meteorologist Al Dutcher. Well, Al, I call this roller coaster season. We've had weather been up, it's been down, and everywhere in between. How are things looking as we look to the week ahead?
Well, Bryce, we did see some active weather this week. We had that system move through this last weekend that brought some severe weather to portions of extreme eastern Nebraska and then turned into tornadic activity to the southeast Des Moines. And unfortunately, loss of life was at least 7 folks in the Winterset area. We did see some decent moisture across the southern portion of the state, particularly south central, southeast, and east central Nebraska, anywhere from 2/10 to 3/10 of an inch, upwards up to an inch and a quarter in the heavier shower and thunderstorm activity. Then we followed up with that system that moved out Wednesday night into Thursday, brought snowfall to western Nebraska, particularly the southern panhandle, and skirted the southern part of the state. So the additional moisture was in the area of about 1/10 of an inch to about 1/4 of an inch liquid equivalent. We've seen that cold air start to depart from us, and now we're going to look at a warming trend, and it looks like we'll be pretty much dry for the next week before we turn our attention to another storm system coming in right around the 21st of the month. So let's take a look at the upper air models and see what we have in store. First thing I'll draw your attention to is the cold air is now being shunted toward the Ohio River Valley. I'm going to start to see a warm up today. With the coolest temperatures will be in northeast Nebraska, probably be in the low to mid 40s. We'll probably be pushing into the low to 50s in the southeast, and we'll maybe well into the upper 50s across the southwestern part of the state as the main snow activity moves to our east. Nothing really in the center part of the country. Now, as we go into Sunday, we see this trough digging through the southern stream and the northern stream as well to our north. So we may see a few degrees warming across the eastern part of the state, but I think primarily we'll be pretty much stuck in the 50s to the low 60s. Most of the major precipitation will remain to the north of us. That system in the southern stream starts to open up and form a fairly decent trough across the southern plains, giving some good moisture to the south of us. For our region, we have high pressure to the north, so we're basically going to have a northeast flow. So there may be a little bit of flurry activity as we go into Monday morning, and it'll keep our temperatures just slightly cooler than we've seen this weekend. Not too bad, but most of the precipitation will move to our east as we see low pressure over the Gulf of Mexico, essentially bringing moisture up into the southeastern United States. Low pressure at the surface in South Dakota is really not going to have any moisture to work with. The time we get to Wednesday, though, we start to see a flattening out of the jet stream, so that's going to bring us downsloping flow at the surface from the west. Should be a really nice day. I think we're going to see widespread 60s and 70s across the state, particularly across the southern 1/3 of the state. Once again, no precipitation in sight. Now, the time we get into Thursday, we start to see a little trough moving across the northern plains. That should cool us down about 5 to 10 degrees from the Wednesday highs. But again, with high pressure moving in and low pressure well to our south, there's just not a lot of moisture being moved up. So we just see a few sprinkles here across Nebraska. And even at this, I think that might be an overplay in terms of precipitation. On Friday, that system starts to move to the east. The ridge starts to build in. We'll bring some warmer temperatures in as we go into next weekend. But buyer beware, that storm in the Pacific Northwest really looks like it's going to move into our region as we get into the 21st. So the 8 to 14 day forecast is shoving the warmer air to our east. I think this is overplayed for us in terms of warmth. And in terms of precipitation, even though this is snowing drier than normal conditions, with that system coming in, I expect this to change dramatically over the next few days.
Thanks, Al. Finally today, for the 2022 crop production year, the University of Nebraska-Lincoln has prepared several Nebraska crop budgets for review. And there's one glaring similarity that tie these budgets together. They point to rising average costs for production for many producers this year. We recently spoke with Nebraska Extension Farm and Ranch Management Analyst Glennis McClure to get an in-depth look at the rising cost of production and to learn how UNL's crop budget calculator can help you navigate the rising tides of growing input costs. Market Journal's Bill Dodd brings us this story.
So far in 2022, inflation has hit virtually every sector of our economy. A brief look at Nebraska crop budgets indicate those rising costs are expected to impact crop producers when it comes to their cost of production for corn, soybeans, and wheat during the 2022 crop production year.
And primarily we've seen somewhere in that 50 to 70 cent range on our corn budgets, both dry land and irrigated. And then probably on the soybean cost of production figures, we've seen more like the 90 cent to a dollar per bushel higher in cost of projections. And then with wheat, we're looking at somewhere in that $1 to $1.10 range on wheat. And of course, it all depends on what the cropping practices are, and also, of course, the level of yields. So we in our crop budgets, we have 84 different crop budgets that we prepared for the 2022 season. And, there's lots of variations in the yields that go into those. And of course, that can make a difference on your cost of production per unit type figures.
Higher prices for fuel, fertilizer, and pesticide are acting as some of the largest contributing factors of projected production cost increases this year. However, higher land values are also a contributing factor and should also be included into your budget.
So definitely land costs are part of what we have to figure into our budgets. And so we utilize the Nebraska Farm Real Estate Report, and we, in our budgets for 2022, of course, have used the 2021 information in those reports. So various parts of the state, we look at what land values have done. And so generally on the economic cost side, as we prepare our budgets, there's an opportunity cost for land ownership. And so that's figured in, as well as real estate taxes if you're a landowner. But if you're a cash rent operator, then you would actually drop, as you're modifying budgets, you would drop the opportunity cost and the real estate tax and then figure in your cash rent or whatever your share rent figures might be. So definitely land values play a part in our budgets. And you have to keep in mind that might be one of the adjustments as you're looking for 2022.
The 2022 crop budgets that are available through the University of Nebraska's Center for Ag Profitability indicate a rise in production costs. However, they don't account for several events that may have impacted the markets since their publication and should be utilized by producers more as a customizable guideline.
But we suggest always just to use those as a guide, and really be prepared to go in and make modifications and customize those for your own. So this year would be a great time to learn about doing that, because there's a lot of good information, a lot of detail into our budgets. But you then can go in, and that's one of the nice things about what we've done in developing the Ag Budget Calculator, is that our budgets can be downloaded into that program, and then you can go in and actually put in what you're paying for your input costs this year. So as your fertilizer costs have increased since like that October timeframe, you'd want to put in actually what you're paying for those things, and then really see what your bottom line cost production is.
If you're having any trouble calculating your input costs for this year, your solution is as easy as ABC. The University of Nebraska's Ag Budget Calculator is a tool that could be of benefit to you. However, if you're new to using the Ag Budget Calculator, there are a number of in-person workshops and online materials available to assist you in navigating and utilizing this program.
But you know, it's just like everything else. As you're starting to use something new, it takes a little practice, takes a little time maybe to develop some of those first budgets. I mentioned that you could download several of the university budgets into your account and work with those. But you could also just start from scratch and just create your own, and we can show you how to go about doing that. And then of course all the features that are part of ABC program, you know, should be something that you know, we explain in those workshops. So we've got the workshops that we've scheduled in person here yet through March, but we also have had a number of virtual trainings online. So it's really easy to jump on Zoom with me, and we can spend time and work through the program and answer your questions and kind of help you get going utilizing the Ag Budget Calculator.
In today's fast-paced way of life, knowing the cost of production for our agricultural enterprises is more critical now than ever. The Ag Budget Calculator can assist you when estimating your cost of production and can help producers when making important management decisions now and through the production and marketing year. Reporting for Market Journal, I'm Bill Dodd.
Thanks for that story, Bill. If you're interested in attending any in-person workshops to get better acquainted with the Ag Budget Calculator, there are still a few opportunities available this month. You can still register for events on Tuesday, March 15th at 9 a.m. in the Nemaha County 4-H building in Auburn, March 16th from 1 to 4 at the Phelps County Ag Center in Holdridge, March 22nd from 1 to 4 in the Public Library Meeting Room in David City, and March 23rd from 1 to 4 in the Burt County Extension Office in Decatur. There are also opportunities for virtual training online through the Center for Ag Profitability. You can find more information online at cap.unl.edu. That link is right here at the bottom of your screen now, and we'll be sure to add that additional link online to the Market Journal website. That is going to wrap up this week's episode. If you missed a story, be sure you've downloaded the Market Journal mobile app or follow us on social media to join in on the conversation. We hope to see you back here next time. Until then, I'm Bryce Duskett. Thanks for watching.
Join Market Journal online at marketjournal.unl.edu. You can also follow us on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook. Promotional support is provided by the Nebraska Farmer Magazine. Market Journal is produced by the University of Nebraska-Lincoln's Institute of Agriculture and Natural Resources.